Right, because that's why I will punch you, Jack, and I will find you.
Make sure he's got both hands. You're welcome. I know, I'm like,
I thought you said both handed.
oh no, it was because you have one.
Oh, I have one. Yes, I do.
The
I
large
one.
You got here before me.
So glad that one went
I went back to the office.
because you turned me on to.
Hey, I'm here. First, I see one more. That's awesome. How's this crack them? Awesome sauce. And I'm like eating it. I'm like, I'll be over. And then Pete was all, she totally, she cleaned up everything. And I was like, oh, I guess we're done here.
Feel right to go the other
Everyone was like, after the last raffle prizes, they like packed everything up. And so I was a little late because I had so I had that this morning. I did the silver for several hours. There. Which was cool.
To the one that goes
Zipped over to that. And here I'm like, oh, it feels like the old days. Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, oh, really?
Yeah, I wanted to learn. That's cool in the shade. I kind of went
You know, like, so both
No, that's what I looked at.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna start there.
Okay.
Will I be in your way if I'm here?
Nope, not at all.
All right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. If we can go ahead and grab our seats, I'll invite our panelists to find your spot. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It is beautiful out, and so we thought we would have a panel discussion outside for once. My name is Joseph Larios. I was born and raised here in South Phoenix, and I wanted to acknowledge one of the reasons we chose this site at the Rio Salado is because it really does exemplify what can happen when municipalities and private entities and communities come together and they center the restoration of health. This is what can happen. This can be a testament to how you can reconcile years, decades, generations of environmental racism and what it can look like, what it can result in. We also chose this space because for those of you who haven't been here before, if you've taken a look around, if you've taken a look inside, there's one glaring thing that continues to be missing from this narrative of what needed to be restored, and that's the human impact. And so we have a really clear example of what can happen when everyone centers environmental health and what it can look like. Yet we have this paradox where at the same time where we can see significant gains in environmental health and quality, we can still see the same health disparities in terms of the human health outcomes within all of these surrounding zip codes and within this community. And so there's so part of the goal of this discussion is to identify how our continued policy making continues to invisibilize humanity within its approach, and with what results in that process. Our goal is to also then explore and uplift some human-centered practices through our understanding of health equity. And that's our goal. That's our goal, is to demonstrate that conversation. I want to start this by giving some context to how we're going to hold this conversation. The backdrop of this is, of course, the Respect the Ride Code of Conduct that just recently was released by Valley Metro. And I thought the best way to give context to what is the process we want to look at and examine is to get the context directly from the CEO himself. And so I want to play you a few minutes of a clip from an NPR interview that Scott Smith, the CEO of Valley Metro, did regarding this specific policy. And Nate?
Work, school, or a downtown Phoenix event. But would ridership be even higher if more residents felt safer? Some say they don't ride light rail because they've had to deal with fellow riders who are drunk or belligerent. To address that, Valley Metro leadership is launching the Respect the Ride campaign to make riders feel more comfortable with the experience. And with me to talk about that proposal is Valley Metro CEO Scott Smith, who's on the cusp of marking his first full year in that position. Scott, is Respect the Ride going to address some of the concerns people have about safety and comfort on light rail?
We hope it addresses the majority of it. There's no doubt that as we...
On an average weekday, there are 49,000 light rail riders in the Valley. Most of those people enjoy their trips to and from work, school, or a downtown Phoenix event. But would ridership be even higher if more residents felt safer? Some say they don't ride light rail because they've had to deal with fellow riders who are drunk or belligerent. To address that, Valley Metro leadership is launching the Respect the Ride campaign to make riders feel more comfortable with the experience. And with me to talk about that proposal is Valley Metro CEO Scott Smith, who's on the cusp of marking his first full year in that position. Scott, is Respect the Ride going to address some of the concerns people have about safety and comfort on light rail?
We hope it addresses the majority of it. There's no doubt that as we've matured as a system, and believe it or not, we're only a couple months away from hitting 9 years of having light rail here in Metro Phoenix, which is amazing to me. But as we've matured as a system, we also have inherited some of the challenges that mature systems have. And one of those is bad behavior. Our system is very safe. The statistics bear that out, and you are safe when you're riding on our light rail. But we understand that when there's bad behavior, that it doesn't seem safe, it doesn't feel safe, and a perception of safety is almost more damaging than reality. And so before we get to the point where we have to deal with unsafe situations, we want to deal with bad behavior.
And how are you going to deal with that behavior?
Well, Respect the Ride is our program, our plan of action to remind those who want a safe ride that they deserve to be able to ride on light rail system safely, comfortably, and without worrying about whether they're going to be bothered or even put in harm's way. It's also to put those that decide that they don't want to ride our system and behave well on notice that we're going to get serious about this. We're not going to tolerate bad behavior. We're not going to tolerate those kind of things that put others at peril.
So Scott, if the board does go ahead to approve this plan, will there be extra security? Is there extra funding that's going to be needed for this?
There won't be any extra security per se to begin with, but we will redeploy. Right now, most of our contracted security guards check for fares. Everyone who's ridden on light rail has had their pass checked. We'll do probably less fare inspection and more safety and security inspection. Our contract personnel will be on the lookout for those who are not following our rules, in the sense that, not in a gotcha sense, but they just want to make sure everyone's comfortable. We'll also have more police presence. The cities of Tempe, Mesa, and Phoenix have worked together with Valley Metro to ensure that we have both on-duty and off-duty police officers, and you'll probably see a little bit more police presence, especially in those times where we would have issues. Friday nights, Saturday nights, special events, the times when people gather, and when maybe someone's had a little too much to drink, or someone's maybe a little bit in what might be a party attitude, but it maybe crosses the line.
I recall when you were mayor of Mesa, not everyone in your city was a fan of this idea. You were an advocate early on to make light rail a reality. And I imagine some people in your community expressed concerns about things like drunk and disorderly, people being too loud. What would you say to those people now
Well, I'd say that their concerns are real. There are concerns. I would also say two things. Number one, the impact of light rail, the positive impact of light rail, far outweighs any challenges we have. Light rail, we don't create crime. We don't create. The studies have shown that. We've actually, our local police departments have said light rail doesn't create crime, but we are absolutely part of the community, and we are a gathering, a concentration place. So if there.
So, in this discourse analysis that we were looking at, I asked myself a few questions that I invite you all to ask yourselves as well. In the frame of this, we're talking about increasing ridership for those who go to and from work, to and from school, to and from downtown events. And when I looked at every other article that was written about public safety, this was definitely the voice that was often talked from about what safety is supposed to look like. And so I invite you to think, what are the buildings within the downtown cores of Tempe, Phoenix, and Mesa that exist that those workers are going to go to? What are those jobs that those downtown core workers that are using public transportation going to? What do those workers look like? What are they bringing with them to work? What are they dressed as? Think about the campuses that are along the light rail line that are most accessible within these downtown areas, and the types of students that would be utilizing public transportation to get to those campuses. And consider who we're talking about. And when you think of downtown events, think of the types of tickets that people are spending their money to buy. What are they spending their money on? How much were those tickets? How many people are going with them? What are the types of venues that they're going to? Because those are the folks, essentially, who were centered for what the purpose, as said by Scott Smith, which is to increase ridership. It posits the question, would ridership increase if people felt or perceived that they were safe? And those people were defined as the folks going to and from work, school, and downtown events. And so who are they? That was the first question I asked myself. And because it's their perception of safety that we're looking at to increase ridership, this well worth public investment is still defined by how much money we can continue to generate and make by increasing dollars of ridership. And this is the frame that's offered to us. And the answer to that I understand within this dialogical discourse is that if we want to address perceptions of behavior, we're going to utilize military-based strategies of redeployment, of law and order, utilizing contracted security and police presence, which mirror that. If we think about who gets hired for police, oftentimes if you have a military background, you are preferenced in the hiring. And so that's the practice by which we are looking to address perception in order to increase ridership. That's what I understand to be the framework of Respect the Ride. That is who I understand to have been talked to with what this should look like. When I look at any of the articles that were written about public safety within any of our local press, those are the voices of work, school, and downtown events that are consistently centered. And the question is, with such a narrow engagement process and censoring and understanding of how we would articulate public safety policy, we get limited and narrow policy that has oftentimes unintended health impacts. And so this is the question we're looking to explore, is how do we start to center humanity within our process? And how do we start to reimagine what engagement can look like differently? And I leave this with why this is extremely important and personal for myself and for the community and work that I've been in community with on this issue, is we have an equitable transit-oriented development project for the South Central Light Rail Line. It's meant to acknowledge the historic trauma and environmental racism that this place was meant to acknowledge, at least from a physical environmental standpoint. What are the opportunities with this new resources and applying new understandings of engagement that we can have in order to have health impact versus just solely economic impact? And how do we apply a lens of equity to understand what we could do differently? With that, I want to introduce our two, sorry, I can barely see, our facilitators for today, Mary Stevens and Sharifa Rowe, and hand it over.
Thank you all so much. How is everybody today? Yeah. I know. It's a tough political moment we're living in. I want to invite us, somebody just pulled me aside and said, everybody's so crouched in the corner, which is what I observed as well. I want to invite us to spread out a little bit. We're actually going to do a partner exercise in a second. Let's make some new friends. But can we spread down a little bit out of this corner? Maybe Luke can volunteer to move. I think Jeff, is that your name? I think we met about a month ago. I remember you. Great, and just kind of pulling us into the space a little bit. And for those of us just joining, maybe we can... Maya, can we move this? I don't know that we need it anymore. And I'm going to invite our panelists to join us. And Jennifer and Teresa. Excellent. I'll probably sit at the end of it.
Sheila!
So you can just grab it. Or you can sit there.
It feels intimate, but then it also is like my voice is not big enough to get it, so I feel uncomfortable with the mic. So first of all, I want to thank you for coming. I want to make sure that we are full aware of what our goal is in this conversation. And our first goal is really to center humanity. To center humanity through the lens of equity. And so we thought to start, before we get to the panelists and to the conversation, to think about humanity is that I'm going to give you a statement of about 4 different scenarios. I'm going to ask you to choose one scenario that you feel connected to. And then you're going to turn to your partner and talk about what would you do if you was in this situation, or if a loved one was in this situation, how would you proceed through the lens of the conversation that we are going to have today around respect the ride. Can you do that? Yeah. Okay. So the first statement is, undocumented person arrested on the light rail for not paying for a ticket. Second statement, homeless woman pays for a ticket and rides the light rail all day during record degree temperatures. She is talking to herself. Third statement, man jaywalking. After police question him, he runs. Fourth statement, person with epilepsy riding the train and has a seizure. So you have 4 scenarios. 1 undocumented persons, 1 homeless woman, 1 man jaywalking, another person with epilepsy. Think about which scenario you would choose. I'll give you a second. And then turn to a person next to you to talk about what you would do and how would you proceed in that particular situation. We're going to ask the panelists to join the group. You're the person.
Let's chat.
Or it could be a loved one.
Good. Nice to see you too. I like your hair. Are you allowing it to blow? Really? One of those
So it would look more.
It looks really good. Yeah. I dig it.
So, yeah, and so tell me what that was like.
Yeah. All right, you grow that. I'll grow up my afro. The only one that I immediately was like, oh, I think I know what the solution is the last one, where it's if someone's having an epileptic seizure on a train or light rail. I guess I don't know. I guess it's the first thing that you see is it's a medical issue. And so, I mean, if it's foaming mouth, seizing or biting the tongue, and it's bleeding, then you can be pretty confident that it's a seizure. Are you asking if it's like behavioral instead?
Yes, exactly. That's a mental.
Yeah.
I just survived it.
So any of them stick out to you? What was the most difficult one where you like struggled to kind of think through? Was the homeless person?
And direct them to services, sort of like paramedicine, but on the light rails, or having one of the light rail cars actually helps their people
It seems like forever.
get direct service, or at least get local service agencies to be able to help direct people to services.
Right there, I think that's been part of just the light rail. I mean, that goes to question, you know, well, on the bus system, what is their protocol for if somebody is having some sort of, whether it's a mental health event or a physical health event, or improper behavior, what are they connected to? Is it just 911, or is it like how do they work with that? And having gone to one of my friends prepared this morning at Dignity, one of the presentations was about all the different community referral resources that are out there. There's a number of fine health units type resources. So if we could equip the light rail staff or the City of Phoenix staff with those resources, they would probably have more options for how to respond. Wow.
Yeah.
That's recent.
The last couple of years. And so we were the consultants because, you know, it's that without sort of painting broad strokes, you know,
So we have about 2 more minutes, and then we'll share our thoughts out. So 2 more minutes on this discussion.
I don't know if
So is there already science just like on that?
For the you know, like that's the business, you know, that actually thereby so like when is
if you see something suspicious, call more or something, and then from the time they was telling us all that if they have it on the red line, they have to all so I don't think there's any, at least that's like 3.
I don't know that. I know that it's automatically thinking of those because one of those buses. Yes, but I don't know. But I know that the other art stuff is disappearing.
So I am going to bring the group back. And I was very fortunate to be, someone let me be a part of their team. And I want to hear a little bit about what that experience was like. What was some of the conversation that came out of it, high level. But I also want to hear, how hard was it for you to stay in your humanity? Did you go into how you would try to help, where you took yourself out of role and tried to be the content expert of like, oh, I would help this person? Or did you stay in role and say, oh no, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I don't know what to do? Or what happened in those conversations? I'm curious.
You want to run the mic?
Yeah, anybody want to start? Not all at once, people. I know it's almost 4 o'clock, but come on now. Oh,
Well, I think I misunderstood the exercise because we definitely all went to how we would participate and help and did talk about appreciating your point that the point is to center humanity, talking about none of these things sound like a crime to me. Why are we criminalizing mental health and, seizure and someone jaywalking? Like all of that is just pretty extreme. So, but we were definitely hearing everybody on the white row.
anyone else?
So I tried to stick with the persona of somebody who has epilepsy. I had a family member who had epilepsy, and seizures don't always act like violently. Sometimes seizures can be extremely like basically paralyzing, and so as a person trying to understand what a person who is experiencing a seizure would be feeling, based on how someone is reading what is happening in my body, could also determine how they're going to contact either help for me or see me as a threat, right? So if they see me as having a seizure, then they may call for an ambulance. If they see me as like somebody who's just drugged up and just acting erratically, they may call the police, right? And so something that is happening to me can predict an outcome that is completely outside of my own control.
Here we go. Yes.
I've actually had epilepsy my whole life, and I've had a whole spectrum of seizure activity. Everything from extremely giggly spells of euphoria that last 30 seconds or so, where I just laugh hysterically for no reason. I have those about 25 to 30 times a day today. I had complex partial seizures where I blank out, and those can. Jennifer was telling me about a gentleman who had one of those, and he was picked on by the security as being drunk. And when he waved away, he was coming out of a seizure, and he was very disoriented, and he was he had a series of cluster seizures in a row. And he was arrested for assault on an officer. And that type of behavior by security is very inappropriate. I've had a tonic-clonic seizure on the light rail where I've been shipped away in an ambulance and had to foot a $1,000 bill. You know, I think I even told the paramedics when they arrived, I said, okay, I know where I'm going, that's my bicycle, it's hanging right up there. I don't need an ambulance. Well, it's a liability because we had to stop the train because of you. So, I mean, that's just disrespectful. You know, people with health conditions, mental health conditions and neurological conditions need to be treated appropriately. Just, you know, as human beings, we can simply tell a person, okay, you know, you may have just had a seizure, or you may have you may be coming out of a seizure. It's okay. If you're not, then we can get you some help. But, you know, listen to the people who are experiencing whatever is happening to them or because of them. You know, whether they're drunk or on drugs or whatever, talk to them, find out, you know, what's going on, and then respect their decisions as long as they support their own health and others around them. So, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for allowing us to do that exercise, and I'm going to keep reminding you that the purpose of this conversation is to center humanity. We are going to point out policies and practices, not necessarily people, because we're not here to necessarily change people, but change thinking, policies, and practices. So that's the things that we're going to center humanity as it connects to equity in the line of policies and practice, not in the line side of vilifying people. So it's going to be my role and Mary's role to make sure that we continue to hold our integrity in that. And then we're going to start with introducing the panelists.
Yeah.
You want to go this way?
Sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Seisha Napa. I'm with Center for Neighborhood Leadership. I'm a board member, and we're talking about how we're connected.
You are going to answer. This is where I got my notes. See? Oh, it was quick. I'm sorry. You are going to share your name, organization, and how you're connected to Respect the Ride, if any.
Oh, sure. So I am connected to Respect the Ride as a consumer of public transportation. My husband and my daughter ride the light rail to and from school. My husband gets up every morning, gets Elizabeth dressed, and takes her to her school. I've been a light rail and public transportation consumer since we moved down here, since I was 8 or 9. I started riding public transportation all by myself when I was about 13. I am a very vocal and strong advocate for those who are vulnerable. Those people of color, those people experiencing homelessness, people who are undocumented, and of course people who are our youth and our students.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Maria Teresa Mabry. I'm a board member with the Arizona Black Voter Initiative. So I'm a resident of South Phoenix. I'm from Guadalupe, Arizona. I am born and raised here in Phoenix. My parents are from Phoenix. My dad's mom was born here in Phoenix. And my great-grandfather actually started one of the first black Pentecostal churches here in Phoenix. So as a longtime resident of family, there's a deep connection to the vibrancy that Phoenix brings. As much trouble as there is, this process has a great opportunity and wealth of knowledge and resources surrounding it to allow this to be beautiful and just be as beautiful as the communities that exist here in Phoenix. So my connection, I remember in high school, I played euphonium. That's what got me to college. I was a really great euphonium player. For those of y'all who don't know what a euphonium is, it is a baby tuba. And so it's about this big, it's heavy, you gotta run and catch the bus. And I remember running and catching this bus, chunkalicious, with this euphonium hitting my leg. And I think about the students that I teach at Marcos who ride the bus regularly to get to school for rehearsal. And I think about all the youth that I interact with. And so that's my connection here. So as a longtime resident, I'm here as a board member with the Arizona Black Voter Initiative, and I'm excited that y'all have taken the time to be here to really talk about how we can transform this and see this as an opportunity of growth and to be reflective of what we dream of.
My name is Angela Flores, and I'm here representing Valle del Sol. I am a native Arizonan, and I've been a resident of South Mountain for 14 years. I'm here representing health equity for the patients that we serve at Valle del Sol. The vast majority of individuals who receive services from us utilize public transportation and light rail to get to and from their appointments. And so we are here in the interest of them and receiving the kind of care that they need.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Longden. I'm with Ability 360. It's the largest center for independent living in the state of Arizona and serves people with disabilities. And I'm here as occasional light rail rider. I don't ride it as often, and but I'm certainly here as an advocate for our community and the people we represent who are heavy users of public transportation. Sometimes it is the only way a person with a disability can move around. You know, I can't Uber. I can't get in a taxi. I'm certainly not gonna, roll down the sidewalk. I can't use a grid bike. So it's bus or light rail or stay at home.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Raquel Gutierrez, and I'm here representing Vitalist Health Foundation. And the connection that we have to health equity and into transportation is that we are investing in community organizers and in neighborhoods where the light rail is going to impact the quality of life in those neighborhoods. We also have a deep commitment to working with municipal leaders around understanding equity in action. And as a native Arizonan and a person who doesn't take the light rail, I actually look forward to it when I can take it. And I find sitting on the light rail to be one of the most important things to ground me as a resident in Arizona, because it reminds me of the spectrum of people that we have living here, and makes me proud to actually live here in Arizona with that diversity.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Mary Stevens, and I'm a founding member of Insight Consultants. I'm also a professor at Arizona State University. As we jump into our panel and we begin this discussion, I want to make sure that everybody has the handout. Do you have the handout, the larger piece of paper? Can we make sure, maybe Michael or Joe, can we do a quick handout check? So we wanted to make sure, how many people have actually taken the time to read the Respect the Ride policy in its entirety? When we did research for this, we of course did our due diligence to see what other cities and other metros across the United States had a code of conduct. Most valley metros and public transportation do have codes of conduct. So today's discussion is not about saying, oh, we should or shouldn't have a code of conduct. It's about the process by which we define what goes into a code of conduct, who is centered and who is included, and who is excluded in those codes of conduct. And that's really what we're interested in here today. So if you want to take just a second and look it over, great, I'm glad to see more people are getting them. So you can follow, because this next question is really rooted in, so I want to ask our panelists, and we'll start with Raquel, with Jade. Jade, can you tell us about the code of conduct? Raquel, we'll just pass this down and it'll end with Sharifa. And our question is, what is the Respect the Ride, in your opinion? What is it trying to achieve? And what are some of the central problematics? So we can get right into some of these places that we want to see change. So what is it? What is it for? And then what are some of the problematics? And we'll move down this way.
Well, I think in its statement, it is trying to make a place that's safe and healthy for anybody to ride. And boy, I mean, who doesn't want that, right? Everybody wants some place where you feel safe and healthy to be able to get from one place to another. What makes this problematic from a health equity lens is that it is the interpretation of the regulations that are really informed by cultural bias and by your worldview. And so if you've never had a family member who has had epilepsy or a friend, and you are in the light rail and you interpret that as something that it isn't, then you potentially can kick off a whole series of actions that affect a person economically, affect their freedom, potentially affect their family because of the economics, or their job. And so it is the interpretation of those regulations or those rules, and to maybe even be more explicit, this notion of who is included and who isn't included in the centering process is very important. So as Joseph shared earlier, we see that I didn't hear any, and even in the articles that I've read around this new regulation, I haven't heard anything about students. I haven't heard anything about like teenagers or so folks maybe who are working really late at night, who are working in buildings cleaning them, or any of that type of thing. And that's concerning for me because they have an experience too on the light rail. And if we don't know what that is, then we don't know how to include it and address it in how they feel safe.
So I can't add much to your description of what it's supposed to be. You know, clearly what we're trying to do is eliminate bad behavior. But, you know, I'd much rather sit next to someone whose bad behavior is that they're listening to their iPod too loud and I don't like their particular choice. Because you're not defining bad behavior in the way that I might, and that's someone who decides to sit down next to me and vigorously witness to me how I will miraculously walk off this train if I'm ready to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And boy, do I get a lot of that. Okay? So to me, that's bad behavior, and we're not talking about it. But the problem with this is not only how it's done through a particular cultural lens that leaves out other potential experiences. Much of what's here criminalizes health or disability issues. And that's a real problem because having a seizure, having a condition that causes you to have excessive saliva so that you would be spitting, lots of other things are not illegal. And so that's a problem for me.
Thank you. The issue that we have with it at Valle del Sol is that many of the symptoms that patients are using public transportation to alleviate are criminalized in the Respect the Ride rules and regulations. So that puts another barrier to them being able to receive the very services that they need. Right, and considering that most of our patients either are utilizing public transportation, that means that they don't have their own vehicle or they may not have any other method to get to us. So that barrier effectively stops them from being able to receive treatment. And to us, that's a critical gap.
So criminalization is a word that keeps being said, right? So this is a short-sighted attempt by a contractor who's contracted by the city of Phoenix, which is why we invited y'all, because y'all are the ones who get to contract folks and have some sort of influence, to attempt to regulate behavior, right? And so it's regulated in a way in which just regular ways of being. How many of y'all get loud when you talk with your friends? Y'all don't talk to friends? Or when you're with your family or you're on the phone? Or like when your jam comes on, you start moving a little bit. Like, there aren't people who just want to vomit on themselves. There aren't people who want to just defecate on themselves. There aren't people who these aren't things that people want to do. And so the frame that is taken actually is a frame that regulates and specifically targets people. There's a reason that when we're talking about the South Central Light Rail, what communities are we talking about? Tell me, I'm talking to y'all. When we're talking about the South Side, who are we talking about?
Brown and black people.
Black and brown people. And so we're also talking about gentrification. We're talking about displacement. We're talking about working class people who've been here for a long time. When we talk about the racial line and the divide in Phoenix, we have to be real when we're talking about this. When we're talking about criminalization, we're talking about a legacy of violence that's been perpetrated. And this is just another attempt, right? It's another attempt that's been ratified by Valley Metro's Board of Directors. This is already in place, right? And so this is an attempt to hold a conversation to say, like, we deserve better than this. We deserve something better. Because when I take my youth on the bus or wherever I take them, they're going to get a little loud. And I'm thankful that they do. Because that brilliance and that fire that's there shouldn't be squashed. And hair that is bigger than somebody's pigtails or like flat hair who wish they had that curly hair shouldn't be criminalized either. So when we're talking and we're looking at these policies, we gotta be real. Like, who are they actually looking at? When you're talking about the South Side, you're talking about South Central. Who are you looking at? And if we're not taking into account people and what's happening in these communities, and that can then we're not doing what we need to do. We're not doing what our constituents need. We're not doing what voters need. We're not doing what our community needs, whether they vote or not, because folks who cannot vote, regardless of what are their circumstances, still need to be respected, still need to be considered. Youth who are under the age of 18 still need to be thought about when we look at these policies. And when we look at service animals, we were just talking in this, like, so what service does your animal provide? Okay, if I tell you and you still get kicked off the bus or you get kicked off the light rail, what consideration are we actually making so that people can get where they need to go?
What makes this problematic for me, Respect the Right, is that it's really not centered around the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It doesn't recognize that all people have inherent worth and dignity. And especially since when we're looking through this at a health equity lens, it's actively excluding and marginalizing people in our community. When I read this, I see high schoolers. I live right across from Central High School. I love those high schoolers. They see me, they make a path, they call me Miss. I've hardly ever been called Miss. And seeing them on the light rail, the energy, the y'alls, the energizing. I used to live in Tempe, right by ASU, right along McClintock. It was too expensive for us to drive our trucks, so we took the light rail and the bus everywhere. Marcos Canizo is right down the street. I think it's Marcos Canizo. And again, one loud, very, very close, but some of the most respectful people that I've ever encountered. Young people. And when I read these things, you know, blood, urine, vomit, defecation, nobody wants to do that. And when I see this, to me, there was no thought put into people who have to use public transportation for emergency services. What if I was a domestic violence victim and my partner assaulted me and I had a bloody nose and there was no way I could pay for a taxi? There was no way that I was going to call an ambulance. How am I going to get the care that I need? What if I ran out the door and the only thing I had on me was my debit card and my phone, and that's all I had in the world? How am I going to get the care that I need? The other thing, again, coming back to our youth, our students and youth, Center for Neighborhood Leadership really focuses on people of color, communities of color, and empowerment of our students. When I see indecent exposures prohibited, top, bottoms, and footwear required at all times, that reads to me as a dress code criminalization, which is part of the school to prison pipeline. These small infractions of, you know, maybe this is the only top that I had, or maybe this is the only clean pair of pants that I had. Maybe it's a little holey, maybe it has the holes have gotten a bit higher and higher because my parents can't afford to get me new jeans. I had been in that situation as a junior high and high schooler. We, as a family, we experienced homelessness where we had to make active decisions of whether or not we're going to pay our rent, or are we going to eat, or are we going to go down to the laundromat and wash our clothes. So when I see infractions like this, people's lives can be changed because they're not wearing the right top.
Thank you. And I wanted to give an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Sheree Farrow. I'm a neutral facilitator by both skill and passion. I see my work as centering humanity through the lens of equity. And I do this to mostly dismantle systemic oppression and racism. And I wanted to let you know that, even though I'm not going to tell you how all the ways of how I do it, but neutral facilitation and collective impact. And so I want to ask the panel another question. So how does this policy center economic development, and how does it hinder or harm health equity as we would like to see it lived out in our community?
Yeah, I can go first. So when we heard the gentleman speak on the recording before we started, there are three major types of riders, right? So there are folks who are going to work, there are folks that go into school and downtown events. So that means if you're going to go downtown, you're going to go to an event like, say, the Symphony, all right? Who do you imagine? Who are those type of people? Okay, and when you're thinking about school downtown, or like going on the light rail, who do you imagine? Kids, ASU, what do they look like? Preppy kids, okay, and work. So what they're carrying when they go to work, what do they look like when they're working? Right, there's so many different types. So I think, right, and right, right. And when he was speaking, I'm telling you, I go to the symphony. I used to work at Superior Court in the Justice Courts, and I'm a graduate of Arizona State, go Sun Devils. All right. So when we're talking about who we're focusing on, what we're centering, even as we look at that, like who's being centered, it aren't the folks here. They aren't the folks who are working. They're not the kids we're considering who don't have the fare, and even the folks who are being fined. People who cannot pay light rail fare are being fined because they couldn't pay the fare, and so that's associated with a fee, right? So folks are further criminalized because they are poor. We should not criminalize poverty. And so, and this is a tangible ask that I'm gonna have for you again later, is that if folks get a ticket, that it should be completely resolvable through community service.
I think the central question I have is when you say the word respect, do we have a shared meaning about of the people that we are serving that are utilizing that service to get the care, the health care that they desperately need?
So I wanted to say that I think sometimes when I'm in this type of a conversation, there's a part of me that's like hoping and wishing. And it's the hoping and wishing that in the situations that were described earlier, that we're banking on people's moral integrity to step into a situation in a compassionate, a healthy way, a way that's safe for everybody. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that is not the case. Not everybody is going to step up, perhaps how we might step up in this area, in a way that's caring, in a way that doesn't go, the first place isn't to call the police 911 or to grab the security guard. And I just think that's a reality check that we have to acknowledge. The other thing is that I wanted to just emphasize, when we're talking about health equity, what do we mean by that? And as a group, we've been working with this definition, and it's on the handout for Vitalists for those of you who received it. And health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. And that includes the riders that potentially might be fearful of a situation. We're not trying to exclude them from the conversation. What we're saying is, how are the people who are the most impacted centered in this conversation? And they are not centered in this conversation. So if we're gonna, and I know that the city of Phoenix has some fellows who were given a very prestigious fellowship and grant to work on equitable transit-oriented development work. And part of that needs to be in addressing these types of regulations in a way where the full humanity of people is really put at the center.
I think this is a good time to, I'm going to ask a question about innovation and strategies because I feel like it's a good transition moment. But I want to know what you're hearing, the audience. What are you hearing from the panel? Because we've heard a lot of different viewpoints from different lenses, right? What are you hearing? What are you thinking, hearing? What do you know differently now than you did before? What are you more sure of now than you were before?
When I read the Respect the Ride rules, I thought, okay, all of this sounds kind of normal. It sounds like they're criminalizing homelessness. But hearing this, it's super clear. A tiny audience is focused on for Respect the Ride so they feel safe. And everybody else is a criminal, basically. And it's not fair. There's no equity. There's no justice. There's zero humanity, in my opinion. Like you said, we're praying if something happens that people are going to be kind and considerate and expect, oh, you're a good person, let's help you. But they're just going to call the cops. So that's what I'm hearing. Yeah, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Did everyone hear her, or should I be using this mic? Okay. Anyone else? What are you hearing? What are you thinking? Can we use the mic? Yeah. Did someone raise their, am I coming to someone?
Thanks, Joe.
One thing that's becoming more clear to me is that I think of this as public transportation and just inherently plugging that word in public, and then putting policies in here that slowly start to erase people from accessing that public space is erasing them from our image and our understanding of who is the public. I think a lot about some of the young folk I work with who are living on the streets experiencing homelessness. Some of the young folk that were arrested on the light rail platform for talking to themselves, and I haven't seen them since. And how consistently they are removed from sitting on the streets in Tempe or using a park, and now being on the light rail. And then we build these narratives around what they're supposed to do to lift themselves up out of this situation, and it's dependent on the public services that we have, and just by being in their experience of the world currently in their circumstance, or their reality, they're not even in that anymore. So what I'm hearing here is that I think of those who are experiencing homelessness, but it's young people, it's people who are, differently abled, it's people who have medical issues, it's all sorts of folk, and we slowly start narrowing them and cutting them out of this public image. And that's scary to me.
Is there anyone else who wants to share what they're hearing? Okay.
So this is my favorite part, after you do a lot of bitching and complaining. Not that that's what we're doing, but after you talk about all the problems, my favorite part is the innovation, the strategy, right? Because yes, we can probably talk about the problem for 3, 4 more days, years, hours, hundreds of hours, right? But the innovation of how we're going to come together and center one another's humanity, both us who are present and those who are not present in this space, is really the win that we come out of this together. Is how do we do that now? How do we think differently about where we go from here? So I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to answer what are some of the strategies, innovations that could be used instead to support a healthy community as we think about the light rail transportation, this Respect the Ride movement.
I would like to see professionals engaged first in policymaking who are actively working to solve homelessness, to eradicate poverty, who are working in our public education system. I would like to see legit writers talking to people who make policy around public transportation. And I'm talking about anyone from my daughter, who is 6 years old, and she has an opinion, and she'll let you know when you're stepping out of line. And all the way up to my father, who is 62, is a bus and light rail rider. He's actually on his way to my daughter's play right now down 7th Street. He has he was hospitalized and he has a cognitive mental issue now. I am his caregiver. I make sure he has bus fare and bus passes and talk him through his rides. And so if he was to, I'm sure he has something to say on this issue as well. I would like to see a transparent process as to how these policies are not only made, but who you're talking to. And have you thought about how these policies can affect individuals' lives? I would like to see less security and police on the light. I would like to see less dogs, bomb-sniffing dogs as well. I would like to see monies that are allocated for security and putting more police in uniform or security allocated to places like CBI, community bridges. So we're not putting more police on our light rails or on our buses, but people who know how to interact with someone in crisis and knows how to connect them to services. Someone who's not just going to say, do you know who the president is? Do you know what year it is? Okay, you seem fine. Get moving.
I got a list for y'all.
I'm right, so don't worry, I'm right.
So I don't want y'all to get twisted. Just because we're talking about health equity does not mean that we do not want equitable economic development here in Phoenix. So if you look at that definition, please take out health,
put in like economic stability. Like, let me give you an example. We're gonna read this. So, economic development, equitable economic development means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be economically stable as possible. So go ahead and try to use that if that's the frame that we need to use, at least for the city of Phoenix. There are plenty of cities in the U.S. who've already gone through and been through this process. We have connections through Vitalists, through national foundations, and different community organizations who are ready to move and support the efforts here. So do not feel like you in this effort alone. And so I'm serious when I'm talking about a transformative process, that this is an invitation, that this is a frank invitation to show up to my house, to show up and have a conversation, to have coffee, to do whatever we need to do to really get things going. So allow people to swipe it forward. There are people who can't ride on the light rail, who cannot get on the bus. Allow people to pay that fare for them and don't limit it. Because if they got the money to give, why are you going to limit their ability to give that forward? We're not going to punish giving. We shouldn't allow a debtor's court or a debtor. People should not be in jail because they are poor. We should stop criminalizing poverty. If people cannot afford to pay their ticket, it should be fully able to be absolved through community service, because given a little time at a community organization near your house is just as easy and able to get on the right. So being able to remedy these things without criminalizing people, without putting them in jail, let's stop what we're doing with criminalizing folks. So if we know folks are on EBT, we know they cannot afford food. We know they probably working and busting their behinds every day to get their money. The light rail should be free for them. We got EBT cards now. We don't have the food stamps anymore. Why isn't there a reason that we can't set up a system for folks to be able to access free rides? Everybody who's 18 and under should be able to have a free ride. They getting somewhere. If it's going to school, whether they got to get to a job, they're going to marching band rehearsal with their baritone or their euphonium, whatever they got, or they're just going to Canasax, they're going to Rainbows Fest. It doesn't matter where they're going. Let's keep our youth involved and engaged in what they're doing. Civic engagement just isn't about voting, but it's how we involve our community in all of these processes, like these ones. Let there be mobile medical teams. There are people who get sick on the light rail. There are people who are going through things, and we need access to medical care that doesn't result in a $1,000 bill because we got to take you on an ambulance trip that you didn't even want to take.
Right.
Let there be a meaningful, equitable decision-making process for community members. That can look like a community board. One example of that is the San Francisco Bay Area and the BART system that's there. There are folks who are elected. We don't need to set up an election system, but let there be certain equitable practices to make sure that there are black people on there, that there are queer folks and trans folks on the board, that there are folks with disabilities, working class people, and all the people who go ahead and ratify the policy that dictates what's going to happen and what folks are going to be criminalized on the light rail or on the public transportation. Because if this is really public, let the public get involved. There are ways to do that. And we're happy to serve on it, because if we're giving you this time, because we're giving you time right now. If we're gifting you this time, we're gifting you an opportunity for us to envision and co-create together. Accept all forms of ID. Not everybody has an Arizona State ID. We don't need to criminalize people for getting to where they need to go. And so accept all forms of ID, including passports, school IDs, all forms of ID as identification. And then continue to work with public health organizations to collect data about health and health ridership, so that eventually we can effectively figure out what allocations are going to the efforts of engagement. So let me make that plain. Let's figure out who's riding the light rail, how it's affecting them, and how we can better serve and engage folks, or especially around the South Central light rail. Because when we talk in light rail, we talk in gentrification. When you drive down Baseline, it's not that 2-line road with flower fields and orchards anymore. Our people are being displaced actively and heavily when we're talking about economic development. Anytime we say development, people are being displaced. And so when we have the opportunity to engage actively and have a say in things, that changes up our ability to stay where we want to stay. Because not everybody wants to leave.
So I'm really lucky that I work for an organization that is fairly progressive when we think about equity. But even we get it wrong sometimes. For years, we have had team security at our locations, right, under the illusion that it was providing some level of safety. And what we realized over the last couple of years is that rather than provide safety, it had the potential to escalate. And we watched that happen multiple times. And so recently, we've removed team security from our locations, and we now have an engagement team that are social workers that are they are designed, they know, they can see, they can engage with patients where they're at and make sure that their needs are being met in the moment so that they are safe for themselves, right? And create an environment that is welcoming for other patients. That to me is more critical and important in this conversation than more security staff or more uniformed police. I think that there's some opportunity to think about how we're engaging other community organizations that do work like Valle del Sol along the light rail and being part of that team.
So being this far down the line means that there are fewer really like meaty things for me to say. So mine's really short. I'm just going to talk for a while to make it sound like I'm saying important. No, for me, what I think is most important is that we start all of these discussions with the premise that moving through this world atypically is not a threat. And that's one of the biggest issues, is that individuals who are atypical become a threat. And if we can let that go, we're going to be in much better shape. Many of these things do not make me safer, but they do create a more antiseptic environment, a more sterile environment where I may be comfortable. And I think that we also have to remind people that there are more viewpoints than just the singular one that we live in, and that that person who makes you uncomfortable isn't bad. And I think that we need to talk from that point first if we're going to be talking about how to make this safer for all of us.
So yeah, I mean, already some amazing solutions and ideas for making this a very different situation. On some hand, you know, when I first read the first article about this, I just thought, like, this is such an easy win. This could be potentially an easy win-win for all these solutions. If those solutions were implemented from the get-go, the relationship that Valley Metro and the city would begin to change and curve would be really phenomenal, and it would have great impact in the future for other developments. 1. 2, I'm a really big believer in a transparent process and an inclusive process. And I think many of the people have mentioned that already, so yay, Vitalist, that is something Vitalist supports and actually does a lot of convening around bringing people together who might not normally speak with each other into a place where they can, because we know we all want the same thing, which is a healthy and safe community, resilient community. And then just from a personal, you know, I can't really add to those amazing ideas, but I just can't help but think of 2 things. One is, where are the purple jackets? Like, when you go into the city of Phoenix through the airport, there is a purple jacket person waiting for you. Could those people potentially be social workers versus security or police persons? Could they be like our paramedicine, our firemen in some of the cities around here, where they are spending time with a person who has called 911 or is in some kind of a crisis, and then directing them to a facility or to an organization where they are getting services to address what's going on with them, rather than just, 1, taking them to the hospital and having the big bill, or carting them off to the police station. And then the other is around, imagine, what if there was some kind of, one of the train cars was a place where people could actually receive some services or be directed towards services, where this whole notion of partnering with community organizations who are providing healthcare services. What if we had an opportunity for people to sign up for healthcare in the time period that's available on the bus? I mean, on the bus or on the train. Wouldn't that be like amazing? Imagine what we could say about the city of Phoenix and Arizona if we actually created those types of environments.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
And make sure it's not this Teach for America effort where you pull in like
transplants who have no idea what's going on in Phoenix. And like, honey, let me fix. No, like make sure they're people from here. We got plenty of social workers here. We got plenty
And
of
organizers.
folks. Yep, plenty of people.
So thank you all so much. As we close out tonight, there is one more activity that involves you. I wanna reiterate the fact that what we're talking about here is a policy to grapple with and address perception. As Scott Smith said, we have one of the safest light rails in the nation. Data supports that safety on our light rail is not a key or high issue. So we actually can get creative because there isn't truly an imminent threat. So to Raquel's point, to everyone's point today, what an amazing opportunity to think outside the box. And I'm not as neutral as Sharifa. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not. I was born and raised in Phoenix. And I'm going to look at the city people. I'm a business owner and I'm a professor. I want to live in a city that makes me feel comfortable and proud. I think everyone sitting here wants that. We want to live in a city that we're not embarrassed of when we travel the country. And I think if we're being real, that is one of the most difficult places for all of us when we see the policies coming out of Arizona and out of the city of Phoenix. And we want to encourage you to take this opportunity, to take this serious, to help us be a better city. So with that in mind, since we're talking about perception, I'd like you to find somebody you don't know. We're going to partner you up. I know. Gotta make another friend. Because guess what? When you recognize people's humanity, it's more difficult to exclude them from the process. So find someone you don't know well. And here are the 3 questions. The 3 questions are this. Introduce yourself. I see Chris is really excited. You're actually sitting next to someone, Chris, is fascinating right here. Becky, right there. I'm just making that pairing. So introduce yourself, why you're here. One thing that you heard today that was new or helpful, and add something. And both of you, I'd like you to bring to your group, the 2 or 3, something new that you didn't hear today that you think you could add to the conversation. So something you're taking away. Oh wow, that was interesting to me. But something that you yourself can bring to the conversation when you walk back into City Hall or back into our organizations, or I go back to ASU. I have to do this work too. We all are doing this work. I'm looking at my friend Erica Moore here. Projecting all voices, y'all right there. What's that? At the kitchen, thank you, right here at the kitchen table. I mean, we're living in that type of environment now, right? So your intro moment, you can exchange business cards, right? Whatever you need to do. This is a great opportunity. Something you heard today that was new or useful. And 2, what you are bringing to it. So you're active now. You're not just like, oh, I'm just going to reiterate what I heard. What are you going to bring to this? And what can we do, or what can you do differently as we walk out of here today? And then we'll do a quick share out, and then we'll bid each other adieu, and hopefully, we'll see each other later.
I was like, did you see that? I was like, oh. I was like, microphone. Can you? We know Sharon,
One of the things that I say that I found that I didn't really get
So let's go one more minute, and then we'll do a share out, and then we'll wrap up for today. As you begin to wrap up, pick somebody from your group who can be the designated talker, the DT, for your group. So I'm going to invite us back to listen to each other, to come back. So we've had a moment to get to know somebody we didn't know, to share our ideas. We're also, hint, hint, hoping we see more of this in terms of equitable community engagement. Listening to publics is nice. Can we have somebody from each of the groups just do a little bit of a talk out and a sharing that what your group talked about, and again, it was the intros, what you heard that was interesting from the panel or helpful, and also what you all are coming up with, so we can also build together and share knowledge in our own communities. Can we just go this direction? I'm going to look at Rachel, because I look at people I know to be our first people to speak.
Yeah, I'm Rachel. This is Lorraine. We talked about, a lot of this was new, some of it not for Lorraine because she was at a kitchen table. That was something. But I think something that really stood out to me were some of the unique solutions, swiping it forward, having a train card that's designated to offer services. I think it would be interesting having also hydration stations. We have organizations everywhere that hold water, so especially during the summer, just make a space a hydration station. One thing that we talked about that we didn't hear is I think centering people a little bit more, not as much professionals or experts who work with populations that are impacted, but also those who just identify as homeless as a young person. And make sure, if you're looking at these policies and you think, okay, who's going to be most directly impacted by this policy, then you have to ask yourselves the question, are they in the room to make this decision or have input? And if not, then what are we going to do, and how can we make sure that's happening? A reality with that is that you have to slow down and you have to move at a speed of trust and build the relationship first. And that can be scary because we want to hop on decisions fast, but this isn't something that has to go super fast.
We're going to go around. So everybody gets a turn. You want to do this kind of group? Just somebody from your group.
Yeah. So our group was very similar to yours. We were just thinking that it seems like we just have a lot of folks, everyone from people in the city to a bunch of organizations, good intentions. When I read these rules, they sound very typical, I think, of school and the rules I couldn't do. But really, and it has to do with just excluding the folks that are being affected, a large group. And so we have so many people that devote their professional lives and their academic lives to this sort of research. And why aren't they in the room? Why aren't they helping write these, right? So to the folks in the city, not to, we're not trying to point any fingers, but, what can we do to include these folks in these conversations? Because I read these rules and I don't feel like there's bad intention, but if you're on the other side, you're like, whoa, I'm being excluded from this, or I'm being targeted. And I don't think anybody who wrote this, I'd like to think that didn't cross their mind, but it's all over the place, right? So who can we have here? Can we have some council members here, perhaps? Or, so that's what it was about.
Thank you. Kitchen table. What are you going to say tonight?
Yeah, kitchen table? Okay. I'm going to say two things, two parts. First part I wanted to say, I'm sure everyone here kind of knows by just looking at me, I'm from the city of Phoenix. I think as we've been going around, everybody like, in the city of Phoenix needs to do, and I'm okay with that, and I also want you to know, when you're looking at me, don't look at me as just one side does that. I'm also a resident. I grew up in South Phoenix. I went to Sarah Vista Elementary. I went to South Mountain Community College. I am a Sun Devil, I'm part of this community, so there's two sides of that coin. But the first thing I want to say about that is that I'm glad that we were invited and that we're able to be here and to hear this conversation. It has definitely opened my eyes to some areas of opportunity, and I like to look at it as that. And so that's one of the commitments that I want to move forward. One of the things that we talked about in our group, so the second thing, one of the things we talked about in our group is learning from a perspective. She's an avid bicyclist. It talked about how important the bike lanes are with our projects and throughout the city of Phoenix as a whole. She's not able to drive, and so bicycling, the bus and light rail, those are her modes of transportation, and those are critical to her. And what we kind of were able to share is that we get a lot of pushback from the community not to have bike lanes. We get pushback. I mean, we're talking, let's be honest. I mean, we have projects in this community that we get pushback and say, hey, we want as many lanes of traffic as we can. We don't want bike lanes. But when we come to events like this, we see how important those bike lanes are. And shared bike lanes don't always work. And so one of the things that I committed to is that we depend a lot on professionals that we hire. And we just spoke about that. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to depend on professionals in some cases. We have to deal with the community that are actually utilizing these services. But we have to have that level of responsibility from the city of Phoenix to say, how did we get to these deliverables? So it's not only, okay, you give us a product, how did we get to that product? So not just, okay, that's great that we are going to do this project with bike lanes and we're going to have a shared bike lane, but now we need to see, how was this decision vetted? Who did you speak with? How was it, how do we know that this is really what the community wants? And so that's one of the things that we will take back. I can guarantee you we'll take that back, and we'll imply that, not just for South Phoenix. I mean, we're here to talk about Respect the Ride, which is a system-wide thing. We're going to look at this system-wide throughout the city of Phoenix. Anything that we are dealing with in our city manager's office, in public transit, we'll make sure that we're looking at that and implementing those strategies as we move forward.
We'll pass it down to this group now.
Hi, Tara Bethel, Pisces.
So we discussed a lot of the same items that have already been touched on. I just add, one is we realize no matter how much we try to fight our biases, they still sneak in. And the lenses that we wear, and that's when we take the first glance at the documents and we make judgments and thoughts around that. And so a lot of those were blown away today. Another thing we talked about was not only should we try to be more inclusive, but how can we just completely flip the perspective of how we're looking at this to be the leader in public transportation for the Southwest or for Arizona. And so a lot of Raquel's comments resonated with us a lot there. And how can we make Arizona the place that we're proud of? And that when we travel outside of the state and people ask us questions about, oh, what do you think about that, this or that, and say, oh no, that's such a small part of Arizona. It's not what we're about. It's not our culture, and it's not the warmth that exists here. And try to help change those perceptions. And so that was really intriguing to us. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Is anybody dying? I want to make sure I get someone on this side. Don't be shy, y'all.
We had a pretty big group. I'm Ian. Hello. I think that we had a couple of different themes that came through. I think one of the themes that came through was that some of the changes in perception are slow processes. They're not going to happen all at once. They're not going to happen in a single meeting. Sometimes it's coming in with our small preconceived notions. In some cases, like where I came in with the notion of like maybe the light, not thinking of the light rail as a place to solve social problems, thinking of it as just a transportation network. And realizing that maybe that's not the best approach. Like, go to people where they are, not not just use the light rail to try to get people where they are because it's a train and it can't go everywhere. It's just that's the way it is. I think we also talked about some things that came up in our conversations around people and that we feel like aren't addressed by Respect the Ride, but we're not sure it's being addressed in other conversations as well, particularly around issues of sexual harassment on the light rail. That's not necessarily something that's in Respect the Ride, but that's also, it's also not just a perception for some folks. That's a reality for lots of different kinds of folks. And Respect the Ride doesn't deal with that, but I think that some of the conversations coming up today saying we can have a different kind of system or in a different kind of community. And maybe Respect the Ride's not going to deal with that, but that doesn't mean we need to accept that the light rail is great as it is. Like, it certainly could be different, and that different could be better for everyone. And I think that we know that that's going to be a struggle, and we know that's going to be complicated and difficult. And I think Kenneth, right? Yeah, and I think he was saying that part of it is especially with those folks like from the city of Phoenix, which are nice to have them come down here, but sometimes having to hear that over and over again, and not just one time. It's hearing it more than once, hearing it again. So that way, when you're thinking about that decision-making process, it's not, well, we heard one guy at one event and he said do this. It's like you hearing that over and over again, so that way you're getting a lot more voices. So sometimes it's important to have these forums, to come to these forums, we appreciate it when people come, and it's sort of like, bring your friends.
Thank you. I know I saw you looking like, no, we address that. We say something. Oh, I thought you were telling me to bring it to you.
No. Sitting here and I'm feeling it's important for me to identify myself, and I'm going to pick on Sharif if she makes some assumptions about me. She can tell you about in private later, but because we got to talk. My name's Robbie Antoniak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Valley Metro. So I work for a board of directors. Actually, I work for the CEO, Scott Smith, who you heard speak, who would love the opportunity to engage in this type of dialogue, in this kind of conversation as we proceed in this environment. We have a charge from our board of directors, and I'm sitting here. We've been going through with our employees a very significant effort of shifting people's attitudes and shifting gears within our organization. And we talk about why we exist. We exist as an organization at Valley Metro to serve our communities, but most importantly to connect our communities and enhance people's lives. So the last thing we want to do is some of the things that are intimated today in today's conversation, and some of the perceptions that maybe are surrounding the statements or feelings that are coming from Respect the Ride or from our code of conduct. And so happy to engage in that. I think I took 17 pages of notes today. That's a much longer dialogue for us to have. We also plan, build, operate, maintain a safe, regional, multimodal transportation system. Everything we've talked about today in terms of the social construct of getting people to and from work in a safe manner, whether that's because you need to get to a medical appointment or you need to get to a job. Everybody that steps on that train, everybody that steps on a bus deserves a safe opportunity to travel from point A to point B. I'm not going to dissuade you from each of these points. My only comment is, as an organization that represents the variety of cities that we operate the train for, is my commitment to all of you is happy to have the dialogue. Let's have the dialogue. I found out about the meeting this morning. So I'm here, 3:30 in the afternoon, and texting my wife and child, trying to figure out family plans because they're expecting to see me somewhere else in an hour. So, but our commitment on behalf of our board of directors and on behalf of the CEO, I will tell you, let's engage in the dialogue. Make us a part of the panel, make us a part of the discussion, because I did feel like I was a little bit absent in that discussion, or I'm sure some of us felt like we were absent in that discussion today. And then I think there are some perceptions that were stated that we need to educate folks on. You know, this isn't about race, color, creed. It's about behavior. That's all it is. It's golden rule kind of stuff at the baseline.
Right.
It's exactly what you said.
Right. Policy has a direct impact, and so we are excited that you are here and excited to move forward and having a conversation where you are ready to hear these comments, and we can have a clear dialogue where community has an actual voice and decision-making power in the policies that directly affect our lives.
And I don't disagree with you. And let me tell you a little bit. Yeah, no, a little bit about myself, real quick though. A little bit about myself. I'm not native. I'm a Leo.
I am.
Okay, but I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. $14 a month and a transit pass got me access to the world in a very safe way. So don't make an assumption about the smart suit that I haven't experienced what it's like to be on a bus and be lonely and scared and not understand what it's like to go to school, to go to work, and find yourself in an unsafe situation. That's it. It's not about arresting the person that's having an epileptic seizure. Okay? It's not what it's about for us. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you, seriously. I appreciate that dialogue, and it's something that was said earlier, that discomfort is not bad, you guys. Calling something out and being vulnerable is good. Asking questions is good. And I know that we're taught in this society that if we disagree, that somehow that has to go someplace terrible, but it's not true. And we have a very amazing opportunity, and I appreciate your vulnerability. I know that that's not easy. For us to come and do something different, not just point fingers, but develop solutions. And so I welcome this idea of a dialogue and co-solutions and co-creations and testing things. You can't run and do everything all at once. So I appreciate this, and I appreciate people being present. And I could tell you were centering your humanity, so I already feel like that's a win. So thank you for that.
Some quick comments as well. Obviously, I'm wearing the same uniform, so you know I work for the city of Phoenix with the suit. It's kind of, today's uniform called for like a navy blue suit. So. No, but in all seriousness, I definitely, Marcus and I work for the city of Phoenix. Valley Metro's here as well, and as a little bit of background on myself, like many of you here, a local native Phoenix, I split my time between different families on 27th Avenue, Van Buren, and then at Central McDowell in the Marcos housing area. And so we were talking, Teresa and I, about, for me, public transit, like in Rob's description as well with Marcus, is that's how I got to and from where I needed to go. And I actually wish we could have kept the name Tico, because I thought Tico was a lot cooler. But the invitation is something that we knew we had to be here. We want to be here. We have to be in this discussion. It can't be a one-off discussion. Absolutely not. For those of us that chose a career path to work inside the government, that's a special opportunity to then work with people that you either grew up with or that are outside your community, because not all of us, I am by no means going to sit here and tell you I'm an expert on all of these things. But when we do these things together, if we can have productive conversations and figure out how can we get to where we need to be and have something when we leave our city or when we're in our city to be proud of it, as a native, I can say selfish, it just feels so good when I can go somewhere else and brag about something awesome that we did to another city. And there's that fellowship that's being mentioned. There's 6 other cities, and the competitor in me wants us to do the best thing that we possibly can, but we will fail at it as a city if we do it only inside City Hall and we don't invite people to come out. So we want to do this with you. We want to make sure that we have these conversations. My commitment that we talked about is that we're going to be at the table. You heard from Rob on behalf of Valley Metro, they'll be at the table. Some of the ideas that were like, wow, that is awesome. Swipe it forward, stuck in my mind. Doing something at the time with trust versus trying to meet a deadline of January 31st. Like sometimes we're so driven by these schedule and budgets, but I never really thought about it, admittedly so. Doing something on the schedule of just being able to build trust with people and then move forward. And that only takes, and that way you don't have to worry about it. And if the community is driving that with us, then it's a win. The other thing that you brought up was how can we somehow create, we have all kinds of committee in the government setting, but I think this is a whole different environment, which is how we can have people that represent organizations like this or just neighborhoods to be able to be a part of creating, whether it's a policy or a program or as we advance projects, to be able to have that sounding board. So that way, whenever we release a document, whether it's this document, there will be many other documents, but at least at that point when we do it, hopefully we can all stand there together, whether it's in a format like this or in a different kind of format, that we did it together, that it's not a City of Phoenix thing, so you don't always have to look that way when you're referencing it. So that way when we do it, we all stand behind something together and say, this is something that they took the time to work with us on. We don't always get this right, and many times we failed. I know that. Growing up in our certain neighborhoods, when the city workers would come and my dad was like, why does our neighborhood stink and other places don't? Why haven't our roads been fixed? I understand that. And so there is a certain different pride when you're actually working in that organization, and then you're not only getting critiqued at meetings like this, but when you're out with your friends that grew up in neighborhoods that aren't working for the City of Phoenix, and they say, man, you work there. You work there. Why aren't you fixing this? You're supposed to help. I understand that, and I know other people that work in the city do. So I want you to know that thank you so much for the invite. I hope that we can keep this going. You have our commitment. I know you have Valley Metro's commitment. However we got to do to not only keep a dialogue going, but starting to put some process together on how we can make some progress as a united group. And yeah, and partnering and
Talk about our partnering.
What's that?
The partnering committee.
Yeah, and we're actually, and Marcus is going to be leading an effort for the city where we're going to start having a partnering on a monthly basis where we want to invite all organizations that are doing work, and this is focused around the South Central project, but to the point that was made earlier, that's going to actually connect to a regional system. So as this extension comes on board, it's going to be a system-wide, but we are going to want to have this, we're going to have a partnering session where we want to invite everyone. So just not to belabor the conversation too much from our side, I just want to say thank you so much for the invite. We're here to listen, we're here to help, and whatever we can do to move this forward, we want to work with you side by side to do these things. And I also appreciate that so many times you do come to meetings and they tell you all the things that you've done wrong and things that you need to do better, and I completely welcome that. But you all did something that I haven't seen in a while. You took it to another level when you said, here are some ideas on how you can do better, and that is much appreciated because so many times you don't get to see that. So I really thank you for telling us this is specifically the things that you can do to start making things better, and they're not taken lightly. So thank you so much for letting us have time to share some thoughts. Joey.
Oh, I thought you were going to close. You would like to? Yes. We ready? Yes, we're ready.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I just want to close with this idea, just presencing where we started. This is an amazing testament to what can happen when we center restoring health. This is also an amazing testament of what can happen and be invisibilized when we don't talk about the humans at the center. I need to acknowledge that we are in a 10-year process and we are in year 4.5 of an equitable transit-oriented development process. And to my history, and I have been following this very closely, this is the first real conversation about what that means to apply equity as a framework to the process. We are 4.5 years in. We have to acknowledge that truth. I also need to presence that for as great as a lot of these solutions that came out were tonight, the starting point has always been to know yourself first. The starting point for this was to understand the historic trauma to the land that was imposed on this land by decision making from City Hall.
We had to understand how deeply that trauma went in order to understand the types of investment we needed to restore to where you see today. We haven't done that investment to understand the types of trauma that's been laid out to the South Phoenix community, to the folks in the South Central line, and the very real role that policies even today continue to reinforce the negative health impacts of. So we have a lot of work to do, and that is actually the starting point, is know your own history. We can't get to solutions without grounding ourselves into positionally where we are. That is actually the starting point, and until that's reflected in every public meeting, until you can see it read in the agenda, until it's in the notes, and it is an expectation that we are answering to this question of our history and how we reconcile that at every public meeting, we are not equipped or ready to define solutions. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that's the starting point. And if there's any invitation to step into the work of equity, it's let's put our histories together. Let's put our histories together, because that's actually where we can start the real transformative experience and start to position the types of real transformative solutions we can co-create. And with that, last thing to remember, the last thing, folks, when economic development conversations, how we pay for all of this. Let's remind ourselves that South Central Light Rail Line is slated to be a $1 billion investment project. We have $2.5 million that are in an RFP at this moment with the city of Phoenix, and how much of those dollars are meant to engage the South Phoenix community. So we have funds to do some amazing opportunities that were talked here today. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to the Audubon Center for allowing us this space for free. And thank you to our audience both here and online for participating.
We have a photo request from our photographer. So before we go, I'm going to invite us to stand up. If you want